First section was section 8, question 1 on natural hazards. Okay, so first question was based on the figure number 1, and it was a map showing you a distribution of major earthquakes in Southeast Asia. You can see that the earthquakes are shown by a circle. The plate margin is for Indonesia is the plate margin, sorry, is a triangle. Indonesia is in white, so you can see all these white islands are part of Indonesia, and the arrows obviously are showing you the plate movement. And question number 1 was quite simply asking you to describe the distribution of major earthquakes shown in figure 1. The majority of you here got 1 mark. And the reason you got 1 mark, not 2, is not because your answer was wrong, just because you didn't give me enough. So it says it here on the mark scheme, you can see on the left. It says 1 mark for mentioning because earthquakes happen on plate margins or boundaries. You can see it there. Most of the earthquakes here happen on the plate boundary. There's a few exceptions, but the majority of them happen on a plate boundary or plate margin. That's the first mark. And second mark is they're giving you a map. You have to give me an example of somewhere on that map. So in this case here, the mark scheme uses Sulawesi. As an example, it's just down, where was it? There you go. You've got a few examples just around there. You can tell me around Sumatra or Java. Anyway, just use the map. It's there. You might as well use it. Just shows off your knowledge a little bit. Shows you can read. So that would give you 2 marks. Question 2. It seems like the same question again, and gives you 1 reason. But again, you need to give me depth. You have to give me the reason and explain it a little bit more. 1 reason why this for the distribution of earthquake is because at the plate margin, which is where most of the earthquakes happen, that's your first mark, pressure builds. And when pressure builds, eventually the fault lines slip and the pressure gets released. And when the pressure gets released, it triggers an earthquake. Okay, so that's a key thing. An earthquake is a release of pressure at a plate margin. Bingo, 2 marks. Lovely jubbly. You can move on. Okay, that's the first 2 questions. Question 3 was a multiple choice question. I think I've skipped it. No, ignore me. That was a figure you're going to use in a second. There you go. It was answer B and E. So using figure 2, which 2 of the following natural hazards were caused by earthquake in China? All you had to do was to read the figure. And in the figure, it used the word landslide and it used the words flood. So you just had to circle the inside of that little circle. Okay. The next question was 1.4. And that's it was the first big one. First 6 mark question for you. And on the whole there, it was good, but there's some room for improvement. Okay. So question 1.4. What I wrote you did well in is the majority of you used figure, which is great because it says it in the question, using figure 2. The few of you who only use your knowledge and didn't use the figure in any way, shape or form, okay, will only get 3 marks max, because the question asks you to use the figure and your knowledge. If you only do one or the other, you only do half the question. So you have to use your figure and you have to use your knowledge. So the majority of you did use a figure, which is great because there's loads of information in it. And the majority of you were able to give me a AO1, so a fact, and give me an AO2, which was an explanation. So the question was saying, using figure 2 and your own knowledge, suggest why the effects of a tectonic hazard vary between areas of contrasting wealth. So you could have picked this one. China is an NEE. Sichuan is a city in China, and you could have said, a city like Sichuan suffered terribly from the earthquake. You can give me a few facts here, because, and start telling me a little bit more about why low-income country or newly emerging economy might struggle a little bit more than a high-income country. And that's where your own knowledge comes in. Your own knowledge will tell me that you studied Nepal's earthquake in Gorkha, which is a low-income country, and the HIC, that is Italy, and the earthquake in L'Aquila. So you can compare figure 2 to L'Aquila, because there's no point comparing figure 2 to a low-income country, because it tends to be any LICs, and HICs are the standout ones. Okay, so ideally there, for 6 mark answers, I wrote here, you need to use more data from the table and from the figure. I also wrote that what a lot of people forgot to do is to compare to L'Aquila. You have to use the data in Sichuan and say, why in L'Aquila there was only 300 deaths? That's way less. Why did L'Aquila deal with it better? Because it's a high-income country. They've got better healthcare. They've got better hospitals. They've got better emergency services. They might have been more prepared. And that why do they have better healthcare? Because they've got better education. They can invest in the healthcare, which they can't always do in lower income countries. Okay, that's where you really have to go to town on the impacts and how they might vary according to levels of wealth and money. Okay, and so ultimately for 6 mark answers, you need to make 3 points and you need to explain them 3 times. And if you do that, you can see on my fingers, you get 6 marks. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You just need to use the figure 2 and your knowledge of L'Aquila. So question number, next one, number 5, that was super duper easy. Had to give 2 sources of greenhouse gases. You just had to say a car or transport, and a cow or agriculture or industry would have been a good word. Unfortunately, if you said CO2 and methane, which a few of you did, I couldn't give you any marks because you're just naming gases, and I need to know the source of that gas. Okay, so you kind of missed out. You didn't quite answer the question there. And then the next one here, an easy one, but one that really annoyed me. Not because you did it wrong, or not because you gave me the wrong answer, just because you didn't read the question. The question said here, complete the table using the letters from labeled in figure 4. So many people wrote the name of the countries, and then it involved me having to read through the figure to figure out which letter was matched to what country. That's not that an examiner will not put this effort in. If you don't answer the question, they will mark you wrong. Fact. Which is a shame because most of you got it right. Just read the question and use the letters. That's all I ask you. I actually wrote it here in big. I don't know if you can read it. I wrote it here, letters. Okay, remember, letters is what it asks for. Letters is what you give the examiner. Question 1.7. Use it. That's a horrible question. Using one strategy, you had to name one strategy of mitigation, and you had to get 4 marks out of it, which is a bit insane, but I'll talk you how to do it. So majority of that basically means you have to make a point twice and explain them. Okay, which sounds weird when you only have to give one strategy, but mitigation, remember, is about reducing the impacts of climate change. And so something like reducing the impacts of climate change might be about a lot of you used the example here I wrote of renewables. So great. AO1, what's a renewable? Give me an example, tell me what it, and then AO2, tell me how it works. So let's say you use solar panels and you tell me, right, it uses the energy of the sun, and through photovoltaic panels, it will convert it into energy that can then be reused. Doesn't release any CO2. AO1, AO2, done, 2 marks. What I'd like you to say is to then talk to me a little bit more about, okay, is that the only type of renewable? You're still using one strategy, but tell me about wind, tell me about hydroelectric. Use a different type of renewable in order to get your second AO1, your second AO2. Okay. Alternatively, there's another example I thought of. I think 1 or 2 of you mentioned the carbon capture storage, which was a video I showed you on Netflix of Zac Efron, who was in Iceland. They suck the CO2 out of the air, they pump it into the ground. Great. Tell me what carbon capture storage is. Tell me how it works, and then another AO1 and another AO2 is you could tell me with this, they could also create something called geothermal power, which is a renewable type of energy. It just uses the heat of the earth at tectonic plate margins to heat up water and provide and spin turbines and provide electricity. Bingo. One strategy, you've explained it twice in depth. Okay, that was number 1.7. The next one was 1.8. It was the biggest question in your paper. It was a 9-mark question. It is on the mark scheme. And they had 3 points for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. I can't give spelling, punctuation, grammar marks if you write waffle or you write something that's got nothing to do with the topic. It has to be about the topic. Okay. It has to be clear paragraphs. I have to have full sentences, capital letters after full stops, that pedantic to get the 3 marks. But they're the easiest 3 marks in your exam. Okay, so please don't muck them up. In this case here, it says assess the extent to which prediction is the most important factor in reducing the effects of a tropical storm. In my feedback sheet here, I said that a lot of you talked about prediction, told me what it was, gave me an example of prediction, told me what was good about it, what was bad about it. Quite a few of you, quite a few of you then told me about protections. Then a few of you told me about planning, which is really good. To get 9 marks, you need to talk about all 3 in depth. Okay. And so what I said you needed in your even better if, I was like, you need to explain what prediction is. You need to explain to me, how does prediction work? What are the pros? What are the cons? Okay. You have to tell me, what is planning? What does it involve? How does it help to reduce the effects of a storm? It allows people to to evacuate, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Can you give me case studies? Can you remember the name of a tropical storm we studied? Typhoon Haiyan would be a good place to start. But to get a 9-mark question, you have to have 3 paragraphs. You have to have a paragraph for planning. You have to have a paragraph for prediction. You have to have a paragraph for protection. And for each paragraph, tell me, this is what it is. This is what's good and bad. And do that for each 3. And then in a conclusion, you tell me which is the best. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense.